Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the first episode of 2020. Now, what are we going to talk about today? Recently, I was asked, what ships do I own? And I figured I would kind of go through the hangar and detail most of them, and give a brief description of why I own it, why I'm keeping it, and, why I feel that this is going to be, a ship that, from my point of view, I should keep, at least for the time being. And where better to start off than a frequent star on this channel, the Caterpillar. Now, the Caterpillar, of course, has something of a checkered past. At one point, it was the heavily armed transport, then it was the heavily armored transport, and now it's just the transport, which you would think would be something that would make me pretty upset. And I mean, there are legitimate reasons to be unimpressed with the way that this ship has been handled over the years. I mean, the modules, we still don't know really anything about them apart from what we saw in a video back in 2015, September of 2015, which was a mock-up before the ship was even flyable, before the ship was even built. There really hasn't been much forward motion there. I certainly have detailed, ideas as to things that you could do with the Caterpillar, things that you could do to improve it, and I still feel that at the very least, the large turrets on it should be quad mounts and not dual mounts. Same size guns, but it should be upped a little bit. But once again, time will tell, right? But why do I still own this ship? The reason is that obviously there's a great amount of money to be made in the carrying trade, just flipping goods from one location to another. And certainly once we get to a point which we were teased with, this year at CitizenCon, once we get to a point where the money is permanent, I feel that this is going to be a fairly relevant ship. It is currently it is the dominant cargo hauler in the game. In terms of size, volume, speed, it's just incredible as a cargo hauler. And so if you want to make money quickly, flipping cargo, hopefully in a game that is much more stable, the Caterpillar really is a bad boy in this department. Now, of course, there are going to be ships that are going to come along that are going to eclipse it in this regard. But honestly, I feel that the combination of speed, reliability, and just capacity are going to be fairly unique to the Caterpillar, and so I am keeping it. Of course, this ship represents my core game package. So you know what, even though there are drawbacks to the Caterpillar, and I'm sure that like a lot of Caterpillar owners, we share a certain amount of disappointment, especially with the way that it currently does the herky-jerky, or has been doing the herky-jerky whenever you land it off of a landing pad for the past several years. But, yeah, I think that this is going to be a fairly strong moneymaker in the future, and if you're taking off and going to Pyro or whatnot, it may suffer a little bit in a much more dangerous environment, but in a safer environment as a flat-out moneymaker, I think that it's going to be pretty solid. But once again, time will tell. But I have high hopes for this ship. The Nautilus. Now, the Nautilus is a bit of a different story. The Nautilus, I would say, is probably going to, as far as heavy combat goes, is probably going to be the apex predator in my lineup for a long time to come. There may be other ships. I may switch back to the Polaris. It all depends. But honestly, the Nautilus, a lot of it was driven more recently by the reveal of the Mantis, the interdictor ship. And, the discussion from CIG about, of course, we're going to put interdiction modules on, that you can put on other ships. But the Mantis was purpose built for that, yada, yada, yada. But it was the part about the interdiction modules, and I just thought, either working in concert with a ship like a Mantis, or just the Nautilus by itself, being able to put up an interdiction sphere and lay a minefield and then just wait for somebody to fly into it seemed pretty appealing. You know, it seemed like that had some very strong potential. And I mean, as far as PvP goes and things like that, I generally prefer to be a little bit proactive and not so much reactive to what other players are doing, but force other players to react to what I'm doing. And so while it may not have the, you know, the muscle or the strength of, say, something like the Polaris or something like the Hammerhead, I feel that it has a lot of potential in terms of being an ambush predator, and that's what I really like about this ship. That's what I really think is really strong about it, and so that's kind of why I own it out of all the capitals. I mean, reasonable, you know, realistically, there isn't a capital in the game that I couldn't technically own or technically don't have, you know, haven't had the opportunity to own in the past. I was offered the chance to melt everything and pick up a Javelin several years ago, and I kind of turned it down. I've had the opportunity over the years to grab the Idris, wasn't interested in it. This, I think, is probably what best fits my personality and playstyle, so that is kind of where this has ended up. I feel that the Nautilus is going to be something very strong. It is not going to be a broad usage ship. It's going to be more niche than anything else, but I definitely think it still has enough muscle to represent something of a threat, and I think it's going to be very interesting. As to when it gets delivered in the game, that is still kind of up in the air. I have a feeling that in truth it is going to be tied to the release of Squadron 42. So this is probably going to be something that features in Squadron 42, so we're probably going to see this ship delivered along with Squadron 42. That is my feeling. That is where this is going to kind of come together. Is this ship is going to be delivered around the time that Squadron 42 goes into open beta. So it's still a ways off, but I think there, for me at least, there's a lot of potential here. The Vanguard Sentinel. Now, on a technicality, I don't actually own the Vanguard Sentinel. I own a Vanguard Warden with the Battlefield Upgrade Kit. You guys may remember that from when the Vanguards were originally released, and then shortly thereafter we saw the variants of the Vanguards, including the Harbinger and this one, the Sentinel. Now, the E-War capabilities of the ship were really what kind of drew me to it. I always wanted to use the Vanguard as something like the eyes of the fleet, that sort of idea. So this kind of seemed like this was the perfect marriage. And I've always enjoyed E-War in video games. Certainly in EVE Online, I was a big believer and a big enjoyer of the recon cruisers and that sort of thing. So I have high hopes for the Vanguard Sentinel, and as far as a fighter goes, this is probably going to be as small as I go with fighters, unless something drastically changes in the game. I still think that mobility is going to be one of the biggest assets a pirate can have, and not being limited by range and all that sort of thing. I think that the Vanguard is probably as small as I'm going to go with fighters, and so I'm still hoping for some minor changes and improvements in quality of life stuff with the Vanguard, but overall I have to admit I have been very pleased with how the Vanguard has turned out. I still think that the weapon systems could use an adjustment. I think that the nose cannons should be on a bespoke little turret mount instead of just being fixed. But truth is, I can deal with it the way that it is. I've enjoyed flying it again, and especially when you put that fixed size 5 on it. You land hits from that thing, and it's pretty solid. So the Vanguard right now has kind of become my by default fighter of choice, simply because the range of all the other ships, in my eyes, from a pirate point of view, disqualifies them. The Crusader Industries Mercury Star Runner, or just the Star Runner. Originally, this was supposed to be the first ship that Crusader Industries brought into the universe. Now it seems that the Star Lifter, the Hercules, is going to be the primary ship that is going to be the first delivered from Crusader Industries, with its release looking like it is scheduled to come along with the release of the landing zone on Crusader, or up in the atmosphere of Crusader, the Bespin-esque city. Well, not really Bespin-esque. If you've seen the images of it, you know it looks kind of like a floating shipyard up in the sky. But anyways, getting back to the ship, as a high-speed smuggling ship, something that is Millennium Falcon-esque, I would say, for me, this was kind of a no-brainer. And it's not just because I like the design, because generally I do like things that are a little bit more angular and a little bit more clunky looking. And so this being a little bit smoother wasn't a selling feature for me. But the promise of high speed, the ability to transfer cargo and to escape the authorities, which is obviously something that I will have to do on a regular basis, I think that this is going to be a pretty strong contender, especially if we get Pyro before the ship comes in, having to make drop-off runs between Stanton and Pyro could be very fun in this ship. So that is definitely something that I'm looking forward to. I hope that CIG will change their minds about doing the Starlifter first. To me, from my perspective, that was a bit of a misplay, putting the Starlifter first. But it is what it is. We roll with the punches. So I have a feeling that when this ship is finally delivered, it is definitely going to be something of a gem. And so that's why I keep it, especially the smuggling. The Cutlass, the ultimate starter ship in Star Citizen. Now, of course, it is not the cheapest starter ship at $100 just for the ship, or $115 for the ship with a game package. There are other game packages. There's the one where you get a little Dragonfly space bike along with the ship. But overall, to me, it is the best value right now in the game. If anybody were to come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about getting into Star Citizen, I'm willing to spend a little bit more than the basic cost of a game title or a game package, what do you recommend? I would always say the Cutlass. Even now, even years later, I still say the Cutlass, because it has that cargo capacity that isn't as much as the Freelancer, but it's faster than a Freelancer. It doesn't have as much firepower in certain respects as a Freelancer, but it still hits hard. It still has, it has the mobility and the range of a larger ship, but it almost has the maneuverability of a much smaller ship. I have a feeling that has been one of the big driving factors with a lot of the community. When this ship came out, when we first started flying the ship in Arena Commander, there were people calling this the poor man's Super Hornet. But it quickly took shape as the universe evolved and as the game kind of came into its own, and as it developed, the Cutlass just became this kind of like almost must-have ship, because it couldn't do anything really amazing. It's not the most amazing dogfighter. It's not the fastest ship out there. It's not the ship with the most cargo capacity. But in a weird way, it's that perfect mix of all of them. It's not the best at anything, but it's just about good enough at everything. And I think that that's why it's currently, according to CIG, the third most popular ship in the game. Now, at this point in the video, I have to apologize, because just after recording the previous segment, I got invited out to a family dinner, so I am now chock full of food, and my meal is riding high right now. So if my demeanor, my voice has changed somewhat, I apologize. But anyways, let's get on with the video. So where were we again? The Corsair, right. So The Corsair is everything that the Cutlass is, only more. That is why I own this ship. I have a feeling that by the time the Corsair arrives in game, we will be at a point that obviously we're going to have 2 star systems, possibly the beginnings of a 3rd, depending on how long it takes. Once you're talking about traveling across all those distances, I think that a lot of people are going to be graduating up from their Cutlasses into the Corsair. I think the Corsair is lining itself up to be one of the most popular ships in the game. And as the game gets bigger and as the game gets much more expansive, I think that the Corsair is going to start to eclipse the Cutlass. And the Cutlass is going to be seen as the beginning step towards the Corsair for a lot of players. And this is even figuring the side turrets, which, I've voiced my opinion on many, many times. I don't like them. I think it should just be a quad top turret, but whatever. Even in its current state, I still think that this is going to end up being a really great ship, and a ship that has a very broad reach in the universe, and as a ship for piracy, with that, quote unquote exploration equipment aboard it, which is probably going to make it easier to find targets. I think that this is going to be one of the premier, if not the premier pirate ship in the Star Citizen universe. I don't think it's going to be the strongest ship because you can technically use anything for piracy, but I think that this is broadly going to become the most popular amongst pirate groups that travel beyond a single star system. I think that this is going to become the mainstay of piracy in the future once it's delivered, so that's why I own it. The Herald. Now, the Herald, of course, is kind of sad right now. Here's a ship that has been flight ready for so long, has been in game and just simply doesn't have its career. And its basic career, information running, could easily exist as an extension of the trade good system that we already have, except this would be a trade good that exists within the limitations of a hard drive or, SSD, whatever they're using in the future. Whatever storage medium they're using within the ship. I mean, you're just picking up information at one place and delivering it to another. Now, obviously, it should be much more involved and there should be a bespoke interface for it, but at the beginning stages, I think it could easily get away as an extension of the current trade system. So I don't really agree with the state that it's in right now. The fact that it has been a dead ship for 3+ years is something that I find very irksome. But overall, I maintain this ship because I know that once we get to a point where all of these things are working, it is probably going to be a very good ship for the people looking to step into the electronic warfare, the information running medium, the hacking, that sort of stuff. This is obviously going to be the entry level ship. Once again, it's tragic that it really hasn't seen any of these things materialize in game, but Squadron 42 is really controlling what we get and when we get it more than anything else. So obviously hacking and information running not being a grand part of Squadron 42 is one of the big reasons why this ship does not have its career right now. But I have a feeling that when it does get its career, it's actually going to be a great little ship. It really, really is. There are some changes that I've recommended making to this ship, such as, since it has such a huge engine, much larger than any other fighter, technically I think it should behave like a medium ship in quantum in terms of range and in terms of travel speed. But, that is a battle to be fought in the future. Overall, though, despite its sad state currently, hopes remain high for this ship. Now, from one heartbreak on to another, TheReclaimer. I had really high hopes for TheReclaimer. I still do. I still own it. I've owned this ship. It has been a fixture in my hangar since it came out back in August or September of 2014 during the original concept sale. I was one of the people who bought this ship. In all honesty, I never figured that it was going to be like the mainstay of ships that I flew, but certainly being able to salvage the wrecks of ships that you may have destroyed seemed very practical to me at the time. The range of the ship, its ability to travel very quickly through quantum, all of these things I think made the Reclaimer a solid, though situational ship for a pirate specifically. I mean, for someone who's doing salvage 24/7, obviously a much broader application, but there's a lot that I really liked about this ship. You know, there's a lot that I really thought was really cool, and I've always gone for more of the dingy industrial things than the refined and polished things. So the Reclaimer kind of fit the bill with that. Now, unfortunately, salvage has been bumped completely off the production schedule. I mean, salvage was originally supposed to be in 3.2, then it was supposed to be in 3.4, then it was supposed to be in 3.6, then it was supposed to be in 3.8, and now it's not even on the schedule anymore. And that has left me pretty sour about the whole thing, pretty disappointed, I have to admit, that it just continuously gets bumped, while something like, say, mining gets a whole, second iteration, or, a revamp of its profession, whereas salvage is constantly kind of like left out in the cold. I'm disappointed by that. I really, really am. I was hoping for more. We do have a second salvage ship, which is working its way through the production pipeline, the Vulture, and yet still salvage is nowhere on the production pipeline. So to me, that is kind of a big screw up there. Sorry, let me add in a correction right now, because I went back and I checked the production pipeline, and apparently the Vulture is off of it as well. So yeah, great. That's fantastic. I hope that one day when we do get salvage somewhere in the distant future, that we are going to be able to enjoy this ship. Unfortunately, it is relegated to Herald status right now. It is a dead ship in the game, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. This is just really, it's one of those ships that just kind of breaks the heart, because there's so much potential here. And now I'm starting to feel like, they needed it for the vertical slice demo of Squadron 42, and they just kind of figured, well, let's get it done. We'll do it for that, and then we'll do nothing with it. And that's kind of one of the big drawbacks with Star Citizen, and one of the places where I kind of, get a little bit displeased, to say the least, with how they do things, because it's choices like this, it's decisions like this that sometimes it's just like, when you look at the amount of time, the amount of effort that went into making the Reclaimer, because yes, it's an Aegis ship, but there are so many components that are unique to the Reclaimer that don't exist on the other Aegis ships, because they have a very different look and a very different feel from the Reclaimer. You realize that there's so many other ships that could have been finished in its place, since they weren't going to do salvage anyway. So it feels like, it's like a hurry up and wait sort of thing. So the Reclaimer has proven to be quite a heartbreaker. I hold out hope that one day it is going to be a fantastic ship and a great ship. But right now, it's just kind of a great big disappointment. And I wish that somebody would try to get at least some kind of tier 0 implementation of salvage into the game, please. But, time will tell. So that is pretty much the Hangar going into 2020. That is what I own, and that is the reasons that I own them. Though some of them, patience is wearing a little thin on some of these things. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.